Welcome, everybody, to the Resilient Minds podcast. I'm very excited to meet a new friend and a great guest and a man of tremendous purpose and values. Kal, I'm sorry, how do I pronounce your last name, brother? I didn't even ask before we jumped on, but Kal, is it Dosanjh?
Dosanjh, you got it.
Dosanjh.
Very close, Eric. I'll
Amazing.
give it.
Yes. So, Kal, welcome to the show. I'm very grateful and honored to connect with you. Big shout out to Aaron Bahia for bringing us together. Lots of love to you, brother. And so I'm really excited to really get to know you, brother, and to really I've looked, a lot of depth of what you're doing for children and how you're in service of such responsible role modeling. But I'd love for you to share a little bit about kind of what you're doing, what you're up to in the world, and why it's so important to you, just to get us started off, brother.
Absolutely. It's just anytime we launch into our respective journeys, I think there's always a mission or a purpose behind it. And a lot of that mission and purpose is defined by our personal experiences and circumstances. And mine just happened to be policing. And I'm coming into my 24th year as a law enforcement officer. And many people, when they think about the uniform, they just think about the long arm of the law and enforcement officers that are just there to enforce the law. But I don't think any of us were thinking of that when we put on the uniform. When we swore that oath, I mean, granted, it's for the protection of society, and we swore an oath to preserve life. And I've always had that as part of my core value. But more importantly than that, I wanted to make that difference. And when I say wanted to make that difference is even growing up as a kid, I always just saw them as role models and as mentors. And but unfortunately, at the time I was growing up, there was never real any bridge or portal of communication or interaction with the police. They would be in their cars, just driving by or responding to calls. And so, you know what, just from a far off distance, standing on the sidelines as a bystander, you just appreciated what they did. But there was never any direct interaction. But growing up, getting to know officers, I just realized that here is a real, genuine, sincere opportunity to really build a connection and rapport with the next generation within the community. And I think it would be a tremendous loss if we didn't take full advantage of that. And so all of this came into view during my time in the Downtown Eastside. It's all like, essentially what I'm saying is all the stars aligned because
Downtown
up,
Eastside Vancouver for anybody listening, just so that yeah.
yeah, so Downtown Eastside Vancouver, for those that are listening, is considered one of the violent 6 block radius areas in the entire world, and not just here in North America. You're talking about guns, gangs, homicides, extortions, kidnappings, assaults, robberies, anything you imagine on the vast spectrum of crime, you'll find there. Like it's miniature Gotham City, and every super villain that you could think about exists in that area, and it is just tremendously violent. And what probably bothered me the most is that I would see a steady stream of youth that were coming into the Downtown East Side, and the majority of these youth came from low-income backgrounds. They were underprivileged, lower socioeconomic, never provided any resources, amenities, or support systems to help them succeed in life. And these kids came from a lot of dysfunction and trauma, negative interaction with police. And a lot of these kids were never given a chance to play organized sports or engage in any kind of extracurricular activity. So naturally, these kids gravitated towards the Downtown East Side, which is considered one of the largest open-air drug markets in the world. And these kids would either be selling or using drugs in that area. And when I say kids, I'm talking anywhere from the ranges of 14, 15, 16, 17, 18. And our
Which is
job.
fascinating. I'm sorry to interrupt, but I just want to share that's about approximately the time that I got into drugs when I started using around 16 years old. I started smoking crack. 16 to 19 was kind of my time. So that to me is, this time of this trauma, and it's very an important part where we're observing things around us that may necessarily not be so cool, but we might think they are. So it's interesting. And by the way, I just really want to acknowledge, so this is interesting that you're noticing that shift in terms of the times and the ages. And that was exactly kind of the time and age where I fell into, that type of trauma. So thank you for bridging that, because I think it's important for people to really understand the depth of how serious this is.
100%. And so that sort of segues into what I'm about to say next, and I'm sure you'll have an appreciation for this. So, as an officer, our responsibility and the scope of our duties was to essentially apprehend these kids and push them through the criminal justice system with charges. And probably what bothered me the most is society would be pointing their fingers at these kids and said, "You did the time, you did the crime, now you do the time." And they would essentially abandon and neglect these kids and push them to the curb. And what bothered me about that was the audacity, because how many of those pointing the finger actually took out the time to mentor, teach these kids, give them the resources, right? Because the thing is, it's very easy to point a finger at a kid and said, "You know what, you're responsible for this. Did you even bother peeling away the layers and taking a look at their circumstances that led them down this path in the first place? Did you ever consider that both of their parents might be on meth? Did you ever consider this kid grew up in subsidized social housing, was never afforded opportunities?" Right? Naturally, this kid was going to gravitate down that path. And so, once again, we'd be pushing these kids with criminal charges through the system, and it just did not feel right. And these kids would end up at the youth detention center. They would do their time and back on the streets to re-engage in that perpetual cycle of violence. And we'd be back at it again, apprehending these kids, going through that same cycle over and over again. And I have to be very honest with you, Eric. It's when I first arrived in policing, and especially into downtown Eastside, I was very myopic, very one-dimensional, very naive, where everything was black and white. And if these kids were committing crimes and the scope of my duties entailed apprehending these kids, then that's what I'm going to do. But over time, as you get to know their stories, you get to know who they are. Because I remember this one particular time, those that were using drugs, the adults that were using drugs, that were the drug addicts in that area, we already stereotyped them. And we would box them into their respective categories as, you know what, that's just a junkie, another junkie. And I remember this one individual in particular who was on the road to recovery. You got to keep in mind, in the downtown east side, we would be running into these individuals on a daily basis. Unlike the rest of policing, where we're reactive and responding to calls, and you might respond to a call and you'll never see that person again. Downtown east side was very dissimilar to that. Downtown east side is you would have the same cast of characters that you'd be running into practically every single day, because they all lived in that area and they all operated in that area. And so this one particular individual, I had personally witnessed his journey going from drug addict sleeping in the lanes of the downtown east side to slowly starting himself to get out of that entrenchment and moving on with his life and getting the help that he needed going through recovery. And there is one thing I have to say, which holds remarkably true, is that drug addicts that are going through recovery are the most real people you will ever meet. They are the most sincere, genuine, authentic individuals, because they have come face to face with their demons and they're conquering them and they're moving on with their lives. And I respect that. I admire them. But at that moment in time, I didn't have that same depth of appreciation. And so this one particular individual, he says to me, he goes, "Good morning, Officer Dosanjh, how are you?" And he said it very sincerely and with a smile on his face. And I'm like, yeah, whatever, I'm good. And then he stopped me. He put his hand on my shoulder and I'm like, "What are you doing?" He goes, "No, like, I really mean it. How are you?" It's just, he was very sincere about asking that question. And it's just like, he goes, "Hey man, like, it's just, I legitimately, sincerely want to know." He goes, I've come to know you." He goes, "I care about you in my own way." And he goes, "I appreciate and respect the job that you do." He goes, "Just want to make sure you're doing okay." Like, I just thought, how sincere of him, like how genuine of him. who actually legitimately care about how I was doing. And so then I got to slowly got to know his story, who he was, where he came from. And that duplicated itself many times over with others in the Downtown Eastside, other drug addicts that were going through recovery. I want to know their stories. As you get to know them, you begin to humanize them. And as you begin to humanize them and you get to know their circumstances, then your whole personal mission changes. And like I said, it's just, I was becoming very disenfranchised with the entire system, where I realized something needs to change. We just cannot continue on this path and trajectory, because even Einstein said, when you continue to do the same thing over and over again and you expect a different result, that's insanity. And it's just, if we're going to change this, what's happening down there, if we're going to change these people's lives, if we're going to change crime rates, if we're going to change trends, then something needs to change with inside yourself. And I think my real epiphany or tipping point came one particular night where I was the acting sergeant in my police cruiser one night. And I remember pulling my cruiser into one of the lanes in the Downtown Eastside around 2 a.m. in the morning. It was cold, it was dark, it was raining hard. And I remember pulling my car into that lane and seeing a young kid sitting behind a garbage dumpster, 2 a.m. in the morning, getting his crack pipe ready. And I later learned he was 15 years old. He sees my car, he throws down his pipe and he begins to walk away. Hoodie over his head, you can tell he's totally disheveled and more or less just given up on me. Imagine that, a 15-year-old kid. That's just so, that just seems so discouraged with everything that's happening around him. And as he begins to walk away, I'd already made up my mind. I said, I'm not going to arrest him, but rather I want to know his story. I want to know where his family is, why, what's he doing down here, where's his home? These were all sincere questions that I legitimately wanted to ask. And so I call him over. I'm like, hey, come over here for a sec. He keeps walking. And so I say it again, this time a little bit louder. He turns around, he walks up to me, and he puts his wrists up in front of me like that. And he goes, if you're going to throw on the handcuffs, do it now. Otherwise, I take it, I'm free to go. And just this hardened, calloused edge about him, I understand. How can you not expect any different, considering that he's a byproduct of his environment? These circumstances was what he was forged from and who he's become. So I look him in the eyes and I'm like, hey man, time out. I'm not here to throw on any handcuffs. You are free to go. But before you go, I legitimately want to know, what are you doing down here? Where's your home? Where's your family? I don't think any police officer had ever asked him that before. And he puts his head down. He was taken aback a little bit, but he puts his head down and he thinks about it. And then he looks me back in the eyes, and instead of answering my questions, he poses the following questions to me. He said, tell me something. He said, if your mom left you when you were young and you have no idea who she is or where she is, your dad's lying drunk on the sofa right now and has no idea where you are, and your only brother is sitting in jail for dealing drugs and there's nobody else at home. He said, where would you be? Now, if you think about it, yourself or any of your listeners, where would you be? Where would I be? If we were in his circumstances, I think it would be tremendously egotistical to think that we would be anywhere different. I can promise you one thing, that we would probably be in the same circumstances if we emerged from that environment. And I told him straight up, I said, look, man, I'm not going to let you go back into that. And so I called MCFD, which is the Ministry of Children and Families, our social services, and they came down and got the kid and put the kid into a group home, which was a far better environment than what that kid was in. And many times over the years, I've been asked, hey, what happened to the kid? And I'll be honest with you, I don't know. The reason why I don't know is because there's hundreds, if not thousands, of stories like that in the Downtown Eastside. But I'll tell you what he did for me. He changed my life. He was my moment of epiphany, my revelation, and he became my tipping point and the catalyst to want to take action. I just had enough. I was ready to draw a line in the sand. I said, okay, you know what? I'm going to be true to my principles now. And so I approached my inspector the next day and I said to him, I said, let me start running programs for inner city kids on my own time. It won't be on company dime. It'll be on my own time. I'll come in my days off. I'll organize it on my days off. Just help me out here. And he gave me $500 to run a one-day soccer tournament for these kids, which I'm very grateful for. And that was back in 2007. And with that $500, I purchased medals, trophies, plaques, water, equipment, you name it, food. And it took me about 2 months to organize, but I organized it with the schools in the inner school catchment area on the Downtown Eastside. And on the day of the tournament, 150 youth from the Downtown Eastside inner school catchment area came to the tournament. And these kids arrived, were from grade 6 and 7, around the ages of 13, 14. And these kids arrived with these hardened attitudes, these cold, callous looks on their faces with raised eyebrows, looking at us, thinking, well, what are the cops doing now? And I can tell you over the day, these hardened attitudes, they started to melt away. These same kids that would have been probably riding on their bikes, sticking up their middle fingers and telling us to F off pigs, were now giving us hugs and high fives by the end of the tournament. And beginning to realize that, you know what, we care about them, and that we legitimately want to help. And that relationship then grew exponentially every single year, so that the Vancouver School Board and my respective law enforcement agency recognized the value of the program, so it grew exponentially. And so within the course of 7 years, we went from a small park in the Downtown East Side called Strathmore Park with 150 kids to renting out all of BC Place Stadium with over 1,000 kids playing on the turf free of cost. And that became the impetus to create Kids Play Foundation, a nonprofit which is predicated on 2 principles. Number one, every single program will be free, so that no child will be deprived of an opportunity because they might be financially restricted to their parents or their guardians. Number two, we will build leaders in the community, that we will give volunteers in the community a platform to mentor and guide and become the next generation of leaders, so that we can hand over the torch to the next generation so that they can carry on in perpetuity. And so I'm proud to say, God's good grace, that from 2015 till now, over 100,000 kids have participated in our programs absolutely free of cost. And we are across Canada in 3 major cities and around the world in Colombia, Uganda, India, and Bangladesh.
Brother, amazing. First of all, thank you for doing this, for being so committed to the next generation and to brothers and sisters that don't know they even need your help. You know, like, this to me is really meaningful, brother. I can tell you that from my experience, I know I would have had a little bit more help from some of the police officers during my time. It would have changed a lot of my story. However, I'm very grateful for the story because it's made me the man that I am today. And I know that there's people out there that need you and what you're doing in a very meaningful way. Because you're right, you know, when I was going through it, the box of the officers was really very important. And that compassion that you had beautifully, you know, stepped through and created for yourself and these men and women has created new opportunities and a healing, because it is the connection that heals us, the compassion that fulfills us, and this grace that comes through us. And so with that, I just really want to acknowledge that wisdom that you followed within yourself uh, by being curious, really that curiosity that I think that society for a very long time and our predecessors chose not to follow through with because of a construct based off of a manipulated construction that they've inherited versus challenged. And challenging the status quo is our duty, our responsibility. Ask better questions and create better environments and cultivate more relationships so that we can follow that inner oath, that
100%.
inner oath, that inner oath that we really know we've known since we've come. And it's also the same oath that got you into the force, right? So it's like, this is for the people, to create and support the people. And so if more officers around the world, if more law enforcement around the world focused on this type of care, where love was the primal force instead of fear and curiosity, what could we do as a team?
Yeah,
You know?
man, 100%. It's a matter of changing that dynamic, right? That paradigm shift in thinking. And that's exactly it. You hit the nail on the head. It's the primal force should be love and not fear. And I think a lot of times when the public or the youth take a look at police officers in uniform, maybe it instills some sense of fear.
Right.
And wanted to eradicate that. I wanted to break down that barrier. I wanted to build that rapport, build that connection, build that communication bridge, and let them know that, you know what, this is one community and we're here for one another. As a matter of fact, just with my academic background, at the time I was going through university, I got my degree in criminology. And policing always fascinated me, even back in the day when I was going through my studies. But one in particular was the principles of Robert Peel. And Robert Peel was the founder and considered the father of modern day policing. And one of his primary principles was that the police is the public and the public is the police. And that's what we also always have to keep in mind, is that we are one of the same. That there needs to be this fundamental, very rudimentary grassroots level connection with the public. It's not a matter of us just responding to call, taking notes, and charging people. I think it's more than that. I think we have a responsibility, a fundamental responsibility to the public and to the community. And it's a blessing that we're in a position that we can actually make a difference in a child's life.
And it's beautiful that you speak of responsibility or the ability to respond, because it creates this level of sovereignty for the officers as well. It cultivates and empowers them to find better solutions rather than being by just a book. They can pay attention to identifying their own sovereign responsibility in a certain situation versus, kind of throwing a book that was also created by a corrupted system instead of focusing on some sort of an inherent sovereign responsible role within themselves. So I'm curious, when you talk about the next generation and our responsibility to the people, how do you see the shift in terms of policing and serving the youth, the socioeconomic support, these low-income families and trauma and this activities? How can, from your perspective, this be evolved to a new nature? Because, correct me if I'm wrong, right now, the way that the system lies is that it's very interdependent on the municipality or the government system. And from my hallucination, the policing stage or the police system is like brothers, you and me, gentlemen, women that believe and take care of their communities, right? That follow this necessary. Oh, so is it a way to cultivate this responsible wisdom that comes from a true nature of natural law, if we can speak, or versus a law conducted by a construct of the mind? So I know there's a lot there, but I'd love to get your perspective on how we can really bridge a new paradigm, as you discussed, so that this love comes from our support and, men and women that wear the shield, so that it's even more empowered within that organization so that maybe the organization itself is a sovereign entity versus one that's responsible to a system that we're seeing is falling apart.
We're building that paradigm shift, or becoming a catalyst for that paradigm shift is going to require multiple variables. Multiple dynamics need to be at play simultaneously. One of them is that you'll have a lot of these institutions that are operating independently of one another in their respective compartmentalized silos. So school districts, law enforcement agencies, government agents, different platforms, government agencies. Everybody needs to be working in conjunction. That's my take, is that you might experience a shift in thinking in one institution, but there needs to be that synergy through all institutions that are operating on the same wavelength with the same core values and goals, namely wanting to make that difference at a more fundamental level versus approaching everything with bureaucracy and with administration. And so that's the reason why with Kids Play Foundation, we're focused more on the fundamentals. And that's the reason why a lot of parents that wouldn't normally open up to police feel comfortable opening up to myself and other mentors within the Kids Play Foundation, because they see it as an opportunity to engage with their kids in a positive format. And the other thing is that law enforcement as a whole needs to shift more from a reactive type of policing to a proactive type of policing, where we're focused on prevention. And I am a firm proponent and believer of early childhood development. And so a lot of the programs that we run through Kids Play, we're focused on elementary school kids. We run a lot of mentorship programs in elementary schools. And I firmly believe that if you give these youth all the tools, resources, experiences, and knowledge at an early age, then you essentially insulate them. And you provide all the tools that they're going to need to be successful later on in life. But more importantly, it's a form of educational awareness, because when the pitfalls present themselves, these kids will be better prepared to deal with them. For example, drug use, gang recruitment, some of the big ones. Gangsters are going down to elementary schools now to recruit. And this is happening on a regular basis, where gangsters will identify kids in as early as grades 5, 6, and 7, based on kids that are vaping outside of schools, kids that are from schools, skipping classes, or they might be aware of their personal family situations where they know that the parents aren't really in the picture, or they might have a sibling involved. Point being is these gangs are actively targeting now, recruiting vulnerable and susceptible youth into these gangs. And then what they'll do is they'll groom them over the course of 3 or 4 years, give them a little bit of money, keep them with them, take them out, and give them a taste of it all. So by the time they hit grade 10 and 11, 12, these kids are actively involved in dial-a-dope operations for these gangsters. And I'll tell you one story in particular. And this is a story I share regularly with youth that are going through our drug education programs, is that do not ever think that these gangsters are your brotherhood or your friends or your family. They are the furthest thing from it. You are simply being used as a pawn on their chessboard to further their goals of profit margin. That's all it is. And so one particular story I tell is, and actually all my stories are based on true stories, where it was a 16-year-old kid that had been groomed over the years. And so he started dial-a-doping with this particular gang. And for those that don't know, dial-a-dope is essentially like skip the dishes for drug dealers, where have drug lines, and so a person will call up and these kids will make that delivery. And so they have a driver and a passenger normally in the car. And so in this particular case, this kid had made some basic deliveries and received his part, so his commission, so to speak, for making those deliveries. And so this kid was making about $2,000 a week, making these kinds of deliveries. And so, but they wanted to keep this kid hooked, and they wanted to put this kid on the line. so that he never thought about leaving because he was bringing in good business. So they knew he was naive, and now they wanted to hook him in. So they bring the kid in and they tell the kid, hey, we're going to give you a large package to deliver. You deliver this one and you will make 25K from the delivery of this package. And this kid's like, yeah, I'll take care of this. No problem at all. So the kid takes the package and he's on his way to go make the delivery. As soon as he's left the door with the package, the dealer, his boss that gave him the package, picks up the phone, calls two of his other guys and says, I've sent the kid with the package. He's headed here. Put on your balaclavas, grab your guns, and you guys are going to rob him of the package. And see, you get it, but some of your viewers might not understand what's about to happen next, because they're probably thinking, well, why would the boss send two of his own guys after his own guys, so to speak? Well, you're about to see. So they were waiting for him with balaclavas on and guns, and they took the package from him. And so they jumped him. And this kid comes back, and the boss is like, what happened? Where's the money? And the kid's like, I got jumped. The package is gone. I'm sorry. And the boss is like, well, you know what? Sorry's not going to cut it. And you lost a big product. So here's what we're going to do. Now you owe me. You owe me, as a matter of fact, 200K. And you're going to get it for me. And on top of that, you're going to work off the rest. And you're going to get taxed for it. So the kid had to go to his parents and they had to remortgage their homes for 200K. And the kid ended up giving these guys 200K, and then he ended up working off the remainder. And in total, it turned out to be $500,000. And so this is what I'm trying to tell all these kids out there, is that once you're in deep. And that's what you need to understand, that these guys are not your friends. These guys are not your family, and they are not there for your best interests. And they will use you, rinse you dry, throw you off to the side, and you are just a discardable resource for them. That's all.
There's so many parallels here, bro. And this is really fascinating. That what I see in what you're explaining, because there's so many things, and I do really emphasize, and I do think that this is really something that is going on at on a global scale, and not just in drugs and sex and children and a lot of things that we are not privy or not paying attention to around the world. And I think that it's our responsibility to allow more people to identify like what is really happening. You know, that the darkness it's very fucking dark. You know, and it's not a game to be played with if you're not willing to, you know, walk the path. And I also, you know, think it's fascinating because what you described here with regards to the package and the drugs, I get curious to like listen to the monetary system, you know, the shift in like inflation and the printing of funds and the way that that's been manipulated for such a long time over thousands of years. And it fascinates me because things like this are constantly happening in the financial system, you know, in mortgages, and we're not like paying attention to that shit either, you know. So it blows my mind because, you know, what you offered here was a really beautiful dark side of the microcosm of that it's in plain sight at a macrocosm has been happening for generations. And I think that this is what's going to really help people see that uh, they may be prison or enslaved to a system they may not even be aware of or get more curious about.
Yeah, 100%. But like when it comes to youth, I think a lot of them are simply naive, where they don't have the educational awareness or the foresight or the cognitive ability to understand what they're getting themselves into. These guys are dangerous. This
Right.
is not a game. It's shaking hands with the devil.
Right.
And so, you know what? It was a neat story that a friend of mine, not a neat story, a quote that a friend of mine recently shared. He goes, religion is for those that fear going to hell. He goes, spirituality is for those that have walked through it. And I think for any of these kids that have gone through anything like that and managed to come out, it's given them a different perspective. And I'm blessed to say that I personally have pulled out 6 high profile gangsters from that life. People that were really hardcore bad, that involved in massive drug trafficking, weapons trafficking, prostitution, you name it. And these guys have been able to pull themselves out and get back on the right track and get back to society as productive citizens of society, only because they had a chance to self-reflect, look back and realize the damage they've done, not only to themselves, but more importantly to the community and their families.
Mm.
And they were done with that. They were done with that hurt. And I think it was a very spiritual experience for them. The fact that they were able to leave it all behind and move on and really self-discover a new part of themselves. So it's nice to see that that kind of redemption is possible.
Yeah, and that naivety, that so many of us are having, that we end up actually stepping through it and having great role models is such an important part. Because if we don't have role models that are following these principles and values and really holding on to them, even in the times that are ultimately the most difficult, because it's easy to hold principles and values when things are easy and they're like, everything's happy-go-lucky. But what's real difficult is holding those principles and values when shit hits the fan. And I think that that is something to pay attention to from anybody, whether you're a youth, struggling to navigate, or you're an existing, business owner that is not certain of where to go or take their business in these times of inflation and change and circumstance. So I think that there's a lot of polarities there that allow things and peoples to understand that, hold on a second, like ultimately it's the leadership within ourselves, which you're so beautifully teaching for free to a lot of these youthful. So tell us a little bit about Kids Play and what is it in terms of how can people pay more attention to it, get more involved, come be sponsors and really bring their energy to Kids Play so it can continue to grow.
Absolutely, Eric. So Kids Play is operating on 6 streams. First stream is sports. We do camps, clinics, tournaments, absolutely free of cost. Every sport that you can possibly imagine. Part of that also entails spring camps and summer camps. Sad thing is that when I say sad thing, our spring camps and summer camps have grown exponentially. They've gone from 50 kids to over 150 kids. The sad part is that there's a standby waiting list of hundreds of parents because everybody's financially struggling and all our programs are free and they want a good high quality program that they can put their kids into, but we can't keep up with the demand. The financially speaking and from a personnel point of view, it is tremendously demanding on us. And we want to provide a high quality program without diluting it to the best of our ability and keep it free. And so, but like I said, there's so many parents that are struggling right now trying to give their kids these opportunities. I wish we had more. I wish we had more funding, more support systems in place so that we could grow our programs and do more. And so if anybody is interested in sponsoring Kids Play Foundation, they can simply go to our website, www.kidsplayfoundation.com, and learn more about Kids Play there and how you can donate and give back. So once again, sports is our first stream. Second stream is education, conferences, forums, presentations. We focus on drugs and gangs as our main focus of expertise, but also bullying, racism, topics which impact youth. And so we'll be going into schools on a regular basis and conducting these presentations or putting on these forums or putting on these conferences. And we also do it by Zoom as well. Number 3, mentorship programs. We are aligned with multiple school districts here in British Columbia, where we will run mentorship programs in elementary schools on a weekly basis. We have designated volunteers that go in on a weekly basis and connect with the kids and give these kids mentorship. And that comes in the form of presentations, playing sports with the kids, building a positive rapport and connection. Number 4, counseling. We run counseling programs because I believe that a lot of kids that come through a significant amount of trauma and dysfunction, I think it's naive to think that just sports and education is going to fix it. We need to start getting back to the roots of their issues. And so we provide free counseling services through certified counselors to these families. And we've been able to help hundreds of families through that. Next is environment. I'm a firm proponent of a healthy environment. And so we have planted over 5,000 trees and shrubs with families and kids. And so we'll all grab shovels and we'll dig up the whole ground and put in trees and shrubs in conjunction and collaboration with the cities. So the cities will provide us the trees and the shrubs and the plants, and then we will all work together to plant these, because I want these kids to have a sense of responsibility and accountability to their planet. And last but not least, community patrol. And so we have volunteers that put on high visibility vests. They have been given naloxone training with naloxone kits. And so they walk areas that are a little bit more dilapidated and disheveled and in a state of decay, looking for social disorder, such as littering and graffiti, and then to help clean up that area and keep an eye on the area. And they've been able to save one life already using the naloxone kit, and have located a missing 5-year-old and returned that child safely back to their parents. And so we're out there, we're doing good work.
I'm excited, bro. What where else right now, if you could expand, where would you like to kind of grow into more right now? I'm curious.
I'm honest with you, Eric. I think at the moment, at this juncture, we have grown exponentially, tremendously, literally overnight. And but I want to keep it at that for now. I just want to now start adding layers to all the chapters, building stronger, more robust programs in all these cities, so that all the cities are operating on the same wavelength when it comes to offering the quality of offering the resources and services, and the quality of those resources and services. And so when I feel we're at a point that all the cities are operating on the same wavelength, we have that synchronicity, then absolutely I'll consider expanding beyond that. I would love it if we could expand more chapters into more cities. I know it's inevitable, it's going to happen, but slow and easy, where I'd rather make sure that all the kids that we're dealing with in the cities that we're operating in at the moment are getting the maximum and most optimized service that we can provide.
I love it. So robust resources, city structure, and synchronicity. In terms of structure and synchronicity, what can I ask? What do you, besides funding, what else do you feel can be most benefit if anyone's on here and they can just like snap their fingers, and make it happen? What would that structure and synchronicity look like for you?
Give back to the community, right? It's just a lot of people don't know where to start, and they're like, well, I can't really make a difference. Well, sure you can, right? If all you need at the end of the day, what are the 3 most important resources or commodities that you have that you can give is time, treasure, and talent, right? And so treasure meaning a sponsorship and a contribution, financially speaking, which would be absolutely fantastic. If you're in a position to do so, great. We're a registered charity, and we would love it if we can grow our programs that way. Talent. If you have something to give, if you're a mentor, you're a keynote speaker, or you play a sport, or you can help coach these kids, bring it over, help us out. And then most importantly, time. Time is our most important commodity by far. And if you could take out a little bit of time in a week and go connect with these kids in our programs and talk to them and build that connection, imagine what kind of difference it would make. Where you said it yourself, when you were young, you wish you had that positive role model and mentor to guide you the right way, and your life probably would have gone in a different direction. But that wasn't there at the moment, which is okay, right? You became who you became, which is absolutely fantastic. But if somebody's in a position to make that difference now, I think we all have a social and moral obligation and responsibility to do so.
Absolutely, brother. And I really just want to also thank you for, after reaching out to really opening up the doors to bring the kids from Portland and welcoming them to the event that you're having, the gala, which is happening at the end of the month.
Yes, we have a red carpet event called Coming Together Gala on May 31st at the Aria Banquet Hall.
Yeah, so I'm excited because Shaw and Meijing are gonna both show up there, and I'm excited for you to get to meet them and spend time with them because they are really leading a great charge too in the US and across the world, where I'm very grateful that you have opened up these doors for us to kind of collaborate and really bring our energies together. So really thank you for that, bro, because it's all about happening and making it happen together. So I look forward for a lot of the future of what we get to create. And if anybody wants to directly connect with you, what's the best way that they can do so?
They can do so through www.kidsplayfoundation.com.
Cool. Thank you, brother, for your time. Is there anything last words you want to share, or anything you want to last ideas or thoughts?
No, I just want to say this is a wonderful podcast platform, Eric. And you're doing a great job getting a positive message out there to everybody, and just to everybody, stay positive. That's all.
Hey, everyone, and thank you so much for listening to The Resilient Minds. I hope you enjoyed the show. Please make sure to go comment and like and follow us on iTunes or Spotify. And please make sure that if you really love this, to share this episode. And make sure that you're inviting all your friends to like it as we continue to unfold what the beauty of our minds does. More importantly, how powerful our heart level of intelligence can be when we combine our heart and our brain together. And more importantly, make sure you take the time to take a look at what we're doing at Balanced Media Ventures and how we can actually really support you in doubling your impact, your income, and your influence, and how you can bring your life's greatest vision into your purpose and create it from that level of reality. Talk to you soon.